All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're digging into one of history's most infamous figures. But I have to warn you, the source material we're looking at, well, it's about to seriously challenge the story you think you know. So, we start with this haunting final statement from Adolf Hitler. It's a truly chilling line, but according to the source we're examining, this isn't just a sign of delusion. It's actually the key to unlocking a narrative that's way more complex than the one we've all been taught. And that brings us right to the heart of the matter. The big question this whole explainer is really about. The source material is basically asking, what if the villain we all know wasn't just born from some singular pure evil? What if he was a product, a necessary creation of a much larger and maybe even more culpable system? Okay, so when you hear the name Hitler, what immediately comes to mind? For most of us, our minds jump to three specific things, right? According to our source, these 3 points are the very foundation of his historical image as the ultimate evil. The Holocaust, starting World War II, and that deep-seated, violent anti-Semitism. These are the undisputed cornerstones of the narrative. But here's where it gets interesting. The source asks a pretty provocative question. Is this an oversimplification? Are we missing a much bigger, more complicated picture? Now, what's really fascinating is how the source begins its analysis. And it's really important to say this isn't about excusing his actions, not at all. It's about putting them into a wider historical context by comparing them. This number, of course, is absolutely central to his crimes. 6 million. It's a horrific, undeniable figure that represents an unimaginable loss. It's a number that really defines the evil of his regime. But then, the source puts this table in front of us, and when you actually look at the sheer numbers of deaths caused by other 20th century dictators, something surprising kind of jumps out. As devastating as Hitler's toll was, both Mao Zedong and Joseph Stalin are estimated to have killed millions, even tens of millions more. So what's the deal here? Well, the source argues that a huge difference was in the framing of the atrocities. Mao's actions were hidden behind names like the Great Leap Forward. Stalin had the Great Purge. But Hitler, he laid out his entire hateful ideology for the world to see in his book, Mein Kampf. This, the source claims, made his evil way more transparent and a whole lot easier to single out for condemnation. And this leads to the source's first really big point. By making Hitler the sole monster of the 20th century, the victors of the war could then frame their own devastating actions, and there were many, as necessary evils, done simply to stop an even greater one. Okay, let's shift gears to that second pillar, anti-Semitism. The story we usually hear is that Hitler basically created this wave of hatred out of thin air. But the source argues he didn't invent it at all. He just weaponized something that was already there. And wow, this timeline really illustrates that point, doesn't it? Our source shows that for centuries, we're talking all the way back to 722 BC, Jewish communities were systematically expelled from countries all over the globe. This was not a new phenomenon. So here's the crucial point. The ground was already incredibly fertile for this kind of hatred. It's like Hitler didn't need to plant a new seed. He just found a dry forest of old prejudices, resentments, and conflicts, and figured out how to harness it all into a powerful political weapon for his own rise to power. All right, and now for that third pillar, the idea that Hitler single-handedly started World War II. Once again, the source claims this wasn't the act of just one man, but more like the explosive result of a global system that was already completely broken. The source traces the fuse all the way back to the end of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles just crushed Germany with so much debt and humiliation that it created the absolute perfect storm. You had economic collapse, widespread desperation, and a whole lot of public anger looking for a target. It was the perfect breeding ground for an extremist to step in. And then the source makes its most controversial claim. It draws a parallel between Hitler and other leaders who it alleges were targeted after challenging the international banking system. The argument is that by creating Germany's own currency, totally independent of private central banks, Hitler made some incredibly powerful enemies, putting a target on his back long before the war even began. And, it wasn't just about Germany's economy. The source points out that the whole world was basically a tinderbox. You had Japan brutally invading China, Italy trying to build its own empire in Africa, and the Allies with their policy of appeasement. The point is, Hitler may have lit the final match, but the fuel for a global fire had been laid by many, many other hands. So all of this is building to the source's ultimate thesis. That old saying, history is written by the victors, is true. And in this version of history, the narrative of Hitler as a lone villain serves a very specific purpose. And here you can see it laid out so clearly. You have the messy, complex reality of what happened. Competing empires, economic desperation, tensions boiling over. And then you have the story we're told. One evil man did it all. The source argues that boiling everything down like that isn't just an accident. It's a deliberate narrative choice. This quote from the source material really just sums it all up, doesn't it? To position yourself as the unambiguous hero, you need an enemy who is unambiguously and singularly evil. No room for gray areas. So let's be absolutely clear. The source is not arguing for innocence. Far from it. Instead, it's proposing this different way of looking at it. Hitler as a shared villain. Yes, he's a central and still deeply culpable figure in an immense tragedy. But the stage was crowded with other actors, from rival empires to failing global systems that all have to share a piece of the blame. Ultimately, the source material leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. It's a challenge to all of us, really, to question the clean, simple stories we're given about the past, and to always wonder, if history is a story, whose chapters are we still